Hi, everyone. Welcome to our workshop hosted by Vision2Reality Foundation. Today, we have a very special guest. She is a small business owner. At the same time, she is also a HR specialist in her field. So Nicole is going to be share some of her entrepreneur journeys. At the same time, also share some knowledge about as a startup, as a small business, what is some HR concerns and how you address them and who you should ask if you have questions. And that's basically is her way of sharing knowledge. I'm really appreciate as the founder of the foundation for this caliber of a business owner and a business professional person to be able to donate their time, which is a valuable time to share the knowledge with new business owners, new entrepreneurs, or somebody even wanted to start their careers in Canada here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Winnie. And while we're working on getting my screen shared here, it sounds like I might be one of the first to welcome you all to BC. I'm from BC. I love this province, and I am very passionate about entrepreneurship and about supporting entrepreneurs on your journey. And congratulations on starting that journey. It's not an easy one, but it's certainly rewarding. And it's been a fabulous experience for me so far. So if I can help, HR is, believe it or not, one of my absolute favorite topics. So I'm really excited to hopefully share some actionable insights. My goal is always to keep it engaging, to center the conversation around pieces that are really usable and actionable. So I don't want to spend too much at the high level. There's a ton under that HR 101 umbrella. And we're actually going to start there. I would love to hear from all of you. If you could please drop in the chat. I'm curious, two things: how long you've been in business and how many employees you have. And if the answer is you haven't started your company yet and you've got 0 employees, that's totally okay. Okay, well, let's jump in. I'll keep an eye on that chat. And as we continue, or as we go through this presentation, I'm gonna assume that many of you are early stage in your companies. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And again, I want to make this super actionable, super useful for you. Before we jump in, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and about my journey. I had been in HR and recruitment for almost a decade. And I really, after starting my career in agency and then moving in-house, working for a couple of very fast-moving tech startups, and then following a mentor to a mining company it was the very first project. So it felt very startup-y. We hired 200 people, we hired 500 people in 2 years. That was lots of fun. Really, I saw a gap, and I started obsessing when I was at that mining company. I really started obsessing over how I could better serve growing businesses and how I could create and offer a more cost-effective, more flexible solution when it came to employee attraction, retention, and engagement. So fast forward, Beacon HR is now 7 years old, hard to believe. We've got team members spread across BC and the GTA in Ontario. And we specialize in small and medium-sized businesses, and we offer different levels of HR support, from 2 or 3 employee companies through our Ask HR subscription service, right up to when organizations have 80 people, they're looking to double their team size in the next 12 to 18 months. And they bring us on for fractional HR, where we embed right into their teams. Diane Scheidler is our incredible head of people and culture. She's based out of Toronto. She leads the team day to day. And I get to do sort of the fun, higher level pieces. Here are some of our incredible clients that we get to work with. Oh, I love our clients. We work with a ton of tech, not-for-profit, digital, web, media marketing, PR agencies. And then we work with a ton of companies in the engineering space, food services, manufacturing, hospitality. So we're very much industry agnostic. But again, our bread and butter, what we know really, really, really well inside and out is small and medium-sized businesses. So if you do have any burning HR questions that you're hoping to get an answer to today, please go ahead and drop it in the chat. Again, I want to curate this conversation so you get as much out of it as possible. If not, we're going to go through, we'll see how much time we have. But in my mind, HR 101, what you need to know is these three things: intentional culture design, attraction and retention frameworks, and legal compliance and policies. So here's what you need to know as you start thinking about what your HR infrastructure is going to look like in your company. It's important to understand the full employee life cycle from attraction. So I think about it as a wheel or as a funnel. So you've got employee attraction at the very top of that funnel. That's your employer brand. When you think about recruiting, this is your target candidates. This is how they answer that what's in it for me. This is how you describe who you are for and who you are not for. And that's a really important piece to start thinking about. How are you going to differentiate yourself as an employer, and how are you going to attract top talent? Because if you're not able to attract top talent, you're likely not going to be able to achieve your growth goals. And then the next piece, recruiting candidate experience. Every single candidate, every single potential employee or prospective employee that you chat with, you want them to have a really solid, positive experience with you, even if they're not the right fit. So these are things that you can start thinking about now. Start building your talent pool so that when you are ready to hire and grow, you're a little bit more proactive and less reactive. And this is also going to drive your cost of recruitment down. And then you've got this great candidate, they move to the onboarding phase, and companies who have really solid onboarding have stronger retention, lower turnover. Your new employee that you've probably spent a lot of time and energy trying to find and bring on board, they're going to have a much better experience. They're going to be able to hit the ground running a lot sooner, get up to fully functioning. So a whole bunch, there's some really fun studies on onboarding as well that I won't get into. But what I'd encourage you to do is start writing down, as you have a new employee start writing down those pieces, start that onboarding checklist so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. And this could be something as basic as every new team member that you have come on board understands your vision, mission, and values. And then developing your team members. So employee experience is so important. You've got these great people on board. Now, how are you going to keep them engaged, and how are you going to retain that top talent? The market is kind of funny right now. There's been a lot of change in the last few years. It is February. This is a time early in the year when a lot of job seekers do start looking for their next role. So really important to think through that employee experience. How are you developing and growing your team members? Do they have growth plans? Do they understand where the company is going and how their role contributes to the success of the organization? Do they know what their next role at the company is going to look like? And then rewarding and retaining. And oh my gosh, there are so many fun HR tech platforms that are popping up left, right, and center around rewarding your team members. But at a very basic 101 level, just make sure that you're doing it. Make sure that your team members understand what success looks like. You want them to be able to look back on a day or a week and say, yes, I know that I've had a successful week because X, Y, and Z. And then make sure you're recognizing the right people at the right time for the right things. And if you're not sure, it's always a great idea to talk to your team members and ask them for their thoughts. And then the alumni experience, and this is where you actually do want to maintain a positive, solid relationship with your employees who are no longer with you. Those people could be your greatest ambassadors. They could help you bring in new business. But above all, they can help send those right fit people to your organization. And we're thinking long term here. Culture, I want to touch on culture very quickly. And I love this quote, it's really the air we breathe. There are a whole bunch of different definitions to what culture means, but it's really that air you breathe. You can't see it, but it's vital to the way your business operates. You as CEOs, as entrepreneurs, you get to define your company culture, but it's also going to come from all of your team members. It'll guide day-to-day interactions. Your values certainly goes into this. And I wanted to just shout you all out. You are the chief momentum officers at your organizations. So really important that you are the chief momentum officer, you're the chief repeating officer. And when we're talking about culture, I love that CRO, chief repeating officer. It's really important that you're constantly looking for ways to bring your culture, to reinforce your culture, to define it, to bring your values alive in the organization. A really easy one is to reward your employees based on your values. Yes, that's what I wanted to shout out on this slide. So as leaders in this ever-changing world of work in 2024, here are a few things that are really important for you as you're thinking about intentional culture design. We haven't talked about this yet today, but the conversation around hybrid or remote or in person is still going. It's fascinating. No one has nailed it. We're still seeing a lot of organizations really, really struggle with this, and we're helping advise them on that. But it's really important that you're really adaptable. The values-driven piece is super important. Make sure you as leaders are holding yourselves to your company values, keeping yourselves accountable. And human-centered. It's really important that we as leaders really do truly care about our team members as humans. So making sure that you're finding time to stay connected with them on a personal level. Tech savvy, a ChatGPT, AI, that's such a hot topic within the HR world and so many other worlds right now. And I challenge you to think about how you can utilize technologies like ChatGPT or other AI-driven technologies in your business. We work with companies to really make sure they are thinking long term, and we work with them to increase efficiency, reduce costs, and build really sustainable companies. And I think with technology and a lot of AI really allows you to do that, to be more efficient. So when you're thinking about building your culture, building organizational design, think about how you can utilize these tools. And then I want to call out this one, lead yourself first. We are seeing a lot, actually increasingly, more and more employee relations issues where mental health is at the forefront. Employers are scared to have hard conversations. They're sometimes not doing a very good job at managing conflict. And I like to think it starts here, modeling strong wellness behaviors as a leader at your company, leaning into hard conversations, not avoiding conflict, can really save a lot of strain. And for the sake of time, we're going to sneak past these next pieces, because again, I want to give you the goods and I want to keep it not too high level. So let's dive into attraction and retention. HR 101, utilize a tool like ChatGPT, or there are other AI tools specifically to help you refine job ads. It will save you so much time, and you should have a good job ad template. It should have the basics about your company. You should understand how you're marketing your jobs to prospective talent. You might want to have an equity statement at the bottom. You want to encourage people to check you out on other places that you might show up. So think about things like your social media, that's part of your employer brand, your website, if you have a careers page, if you have an About Us section. So start thinking about all of this now, because again, once you're ready to scale, it will really, really help you. And I wanted to show you a basic recruitment funnel and explain the difference between sourcing and inbound. So that inbound talent pool is when you post your job ad, candidates apply, that's all inbound. Sourcing or headhunting also can be a really good strategy depending on the role, depending on the market, depending on compensation, total rewards, a whole bunch of different pieces. But headhunting is another tool you have at your fingertips. So you might think, where does my, let's say you're hiring a digital marketing strategist, where do they hang out? They might have an active presence on LinkedIn. And that's where, again, you want to actively build your talent pool. You're actively reaching out to these people using keyword searches. And that's another really valuable piece of your recruitment funnel. And you really want to be able, when you ask yourself that question, would I enthusiastically rehire everyone on my team? Ideally, you want the answer to be yes. And I wanted to give you a really basic framework here. This is called the People Analyzer. This is from Scaling Up. And the People Analyzer is a really nice, easy tool to help you answer that question. So you list all of your team members on the left, and then you put all of your values in the columns, and you're basically looking at every one of your team members and saying, do they align with our values? Yes, no, or maybe. And then this piece, I love this framework as well. It's gets it, wants it, capacity to do it, because you can have a great team member who gets it, they understand the material, they have the skills, but for whatever reason, maybe they don't want to do that job anymore. Or maybe this is someone who is coming in, maybe you're a hybrid work environment and you've got two team members. One of them's working 100% remote. One of them's working 50% in office, 50% from home. Some bias that we've been seeing is the team member who is coming into the office, they are more visible to you, assuming you're also working in office. So maybe they're getting more responsibility, they're getting more projects, they're raising their hand more, but maybe they just don't have the capacity to take on the project, or maybe they're not the right person to take on the project. So gets it, wants it, capacity to do it. Really nice framework. And I do encourage you to do a right people, right seats activity on top of this. Not only do you have the right people, but are they in the right seats? We've talked a little bit about onboarding already. Here are some examples of what might make up your onboarding process. So I mentioned the very basics: mission, vision, values. If you have mission, vision, values, fantastic. Things like basic, you want to go through your basic policies. You might want to have them job shadow. You might want to have an icebreaker activity or one-on-one set up with your team members, tools and systems. So the basic setups. And all of this can go onto a checklist so that you're not having, again, to reinvent the wheel every single time. Trust me, it will save you so much time. And again, use AI to support you on this. Let's talk about engagement. So you're engaging so you've recruited all these great people, you've got the right people in the right seats, they get it, they want it, they have the capacity to do it, they align with your values, fantastic, you're doing great. This is a really good one. So an employee net promoter score is just like a regular NPS survey. You're asking that question on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our company as a place to work? And I absolutely suggest that you do this. I mean, quarterly would be amazing. Twice a year is fantastic too. Some companies do pulse surveys where they want to understand this on a more regular cadence, especially if the company is going through some sort of big transition, or maybe you've had a lot of turnover recently. And then on top of this, it's really easy to launch an employee engagement survey where you're asking a few key questions, and it really helps your team feel like you want to know what they think, you want their buy-in. And then the most important piece is to actually take action on it. And I mean fast action. So if you see any themes that come out of your engagement survey, it's really important that you have someone who's accountable for making sure that you're putting a plan together to tackle those themes and to put those to suggest recommendations and to take action on those. This is work that we do with clients often. And loved this quote. I wanted to share it as well. A team is not a group of people who work together. A team is a group of people that trust each other. So especially in this kind of environment where there is so much going on in the world, there's a lot of uncertainty. I always suggest to really proactively think about how you can give your team members more clarity around the vision. How can you increase transparency into what's really going on at the company? How can you, team building is a great way to do this as well. And you don't want your team to feel like there's an absence of psychological safety at the company. You don't want them to feel like they're afraid of being vulnerable. So think about how you're going to lead and how you're going to build trust within your team. It's a really, really important piece. Really great read here is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I should really find out how to say the author's name, but I believe it's Patrick Lencioni or Lencioni. Really, really great read. And again, for sake of time, I'm not going to dig into these pieces today. So again, the uncertainty is there's just a lot in the world today. I'm not going to dig into this slide, but these are, if you're curious, if this is a problem, if this is a challenge in your company, we work with growing companies to make sure there's a high level of trust, make sure there's a high level of accountability, make sure hard conversations are happening, make sure delegation is happening, feedback is happening. So happy to dig into this more. Okay, the good stuff. Compliance and policy. And I promise I will try to make this as engaging as I possibly can. This is a really, really important piece. And this is a piece that keeps employers, especially new entrepreneurs, keeps them awake at night. If you've ever had, if you've ever terminated an employee and you've had that nagging thing in the back of your mind where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I hope that I'm not at risk here. I hope that we crossed our T's and dotted our I's and nothing is going to happen. That's a really, really awful feeling to have. Really, we want to make sure that any risk is mitigated. And a lot of these things are really, really easy to avoid. So compliance is, while it's not the sexiest piece of the business, it's really, really important. What do I want to touch on here? I mean, I think one of the most important things here, and something that is really interesting to me right now, is that compliance actually does promote fairness. And fairness is something that we are seeing come up. Fairness is really important to employees, especially of younger generations. So fairness is really important. Ethical behavior is really important. Integrity is really important. These sound like all basic things. But there are opportunities to really highlight this through your compliance practices, through your employee handbook, through your policies. And we always look to use your own DNA as you're building things like your employee handbook. What are your values? What do you believe in? What do you want to guide behavior? And we always want to look for opportunities to weave that throughout your HR infrastructure. We have a question here. Awesome. So the question is, some of the questions. Okay. How do we build in a cross-cultural staff team so the organization can be more innovative, inclusive, and build a better small business? Love it. Yes, we all want those high-performing, diverse teams. So it starts with your intention. It starts with acknowledging your bias. So we tend to hire people, or we tend to naturally like people who are more like us. So it's really important that as you're thinking through your organizational design, as you're thinking through your ideal candidate, once you're ready to recruit, you acknowledge your bias and really intentionally look for people who might not be like you. Using a panel to hire is a nice way to avoid that. Making sure your job description speaks to not just those people like you, but to a broader audience. And there's some really great tools that you can use to make sure that, for example, your language isn't overly gendered. There's an equal opportunity statement, and you can make that really authentic to you. It's really important, I believe, and we believe at Beacon, that it's not performative, that it's really authentic. And then I think in recruiting, we often advise clients who are really committed to DEIB and who want a more diverse team. And I think it's having some hard conversations and really figuring out what pieces are must-haves. What do you need this person to come in with? And are there pieces that are trainable or coachable? And then having a bit of flexibility there. That's a great question. I could go on a lot longer about that, but I don't want to give you too much information. But that's a good place to start, as always, with the job ad. So what are the basic tools and tech that you need to set your company up for success? Start thinking about a basic intranet. You're going to need to put files somewhere. So something like a G Suite or a Notion. There are also some really cool AI-based intranets or AI tools that help you navigate your G Suite, for example, intranet. So you can get creative there. And then you're going to need to put your employee files somewhere and keep that really organized. Most companies don't start with an HRIS. It's a human resources system, and you don't need to start with an HRIS. There's usually a cost per employee who's on there. However, the sooner you get it, you will, as you grow, you will have one eventually, and they keep everything organized. And typically you start with a basic module, and then you can add on performance management. You can add on recruitment, which would be an ATS or applicant tracking system. You can add on things like, or actually typically they come with vacation tracking. Sometimes some companies need time tracking in there. So HRIS like Humi, like Bamboo HR, we like to suggest start thinking about it sooner rather than later. They're pretty easy to implement yourself, or you can hire an HR expert to support you on that. And then get your basic policies in place. Again, you don't want to we've got, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we've got so much that we're juggling. We've got so much mental load on a day-to-day basis. You just don't want to be worried about if your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. So get those basic policies in place. And then, your employment agreements and job descriptions. Please have employment agreements or independent contractor agreements. please make sure they're up to date. And I also suggest an up-to-date job description. It'll save you so much time and potentially headaches. So really important things. And again, for employment agreements, independent contractors, a really strong HR expert can help you with that, or an employment lawyer. And there's a lot of conversation, and I think I'm a little over time here. I'm gonna wrap up in the next 5 minutes. So total rewards, there's a lot of conversation around compensation with changes to our BC employment standards in the last year, and some changes that are coming up around reporting around pay transparency. So this is really good to start thinking about. And as an early stage company, you don't need to have salary bands that outline each role at your company and what the range is where you're paying within. However, it's a good idea to start thinking about what this might look like. What is your pay philosophy at the company? Do you pay at the top, bottom, or middle of the market? And again, this conversation around fairness is coming up. You want to ideally make sure that your team member is their motivations are aligned, and compensation absolutely goes into this, as does things like if you're offering equity or stock options or other incentives, benefits. Often we see companies start with a health savings plan, an HSA in the beginning, and then when you're ready, switching over to a benefits package. Hot tip, benefits brokers will often do a complimentary consult. And there are just some fantastic ones in BC specifically. Happy to connect you if you have any questions about benefits. And then other pieces of total rewards, we talked about that career growth piece. Training, so learning and development is so important, especially for anyone who's an emerging leader or a new manager. But it's really important that you are supporting your team's skill development in any way that you can. And then flexibility, of course, giving employees or helping align their total rewards with what is important to them ultimately at the end of the day is what we suggest here. And it's going to be different for every organization. We've talked through this already, a couple other pieces. A lot of companies will give their employees early on an education budget. It could be a tech allowance, especially if they're working from home. It could be $25, $50, $100 per month to go towards things like their cell phone bill, their ergonomic desk setup, things like that, and professional development. Wanted to share one last quote with you. Pay equity. I think this is so important. This is from a recent Josh Bersin study. Pay equity is 13 times more impactful than paying people a lot of money. It's the #1 impact on health and well-being. So isn't that just so interesting that perceived fairness among team members is more important than the total compensation? I think that's really fascinating. So I've given you a very quick HR 101. I hope that you've taken away some actionable insights that you can go and implement into your business right away. We've touched on intentional culture design, then we zipped through attraction and retention, and then wrapped with compliance and policy. I wanted to leave you with some great reads. Really, any of these I think are fantastic to start with. And I'm more than happy to connect you all with my team as well. If anybody has any of those burning HR questions, we will always take care of you for a complimentary consultation. You can scan this QR code, or you can find us on LinkedIn or at beacon-hr.com.